Today I'm waiting for the encore. My guest is SARA HOUSER. SARA fronts the indie pop post-rock band Lowen, while also lending her skills to other projects such as the awesome and opulent Golden Dawn Orchestra. She's a frontwoman, side musician, student, and teacher, and I had a great time talking with her. So please enjoy my chat with SARA HOUSER. All right, SARA HOUSER in the house today. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I've been sorry, I got some stuck on my foot. All right. So I've been starting these with kind of going back to mid-March. That's seminal moments for all of us. And I just want to kind of get a sense of where you were at, what you were doing creatively, what you had planned for the months to come. And then after everything kind of fell apart, what have you been up to since?
Yeah. What a ride, you know. I'd say so, you know, I mean, I found out that everything was shutting down. I was actually at Hotel Vegas. I play with Golden Dawn Orchestra every once in a while. And so we had a show, and then right before the show, Topaz, the lead singer, was pretty much like, they're going to shut everything down tomorrow. This is the last show, like last hurrah kind of thing. And I don't think it like really set in. I mean, I think, you know, I had pretty lofty goals for this year. I mean, I was, prior to everything shutting down, I was in the studio really regularly working on new material. I was supposed to go to Chile and Colombia with Golden Dawn at the end of April, I believe. And I wanted to put a solo record out. I wanted to do more Lowen stuff. I wanted to get Lowen on the road a lot more. I really was like kind of like coming into this year thinking like I really want to like invest in myself and like really push my material, and not just like within Austin, but just like, you know, I wanted to like do more, I guess. And then quarantine happened, and my husband lost his job, and I thankfully was able to continue teaching, which is my main source of income, is private lessons. And so I kind of just like, I got really proactive with taking on, I luckily got a lot of private lesson students organically through quarantine. And I just started teaching a bunch and like kind of throwing myself into my work. And then the further away from shows and booking and all of that kind of stuff I got, the more that I realized it was just like a huge source of stress in my life. Stress and anxiety, I guess.
It was a source of it, or it was a relief of it?
Well, taking a break from it was a relief.
Okay.
And I realized, you know, how much of, I mean, I was like on a hamster wheel in a lot of ways, like with, you know, kind of living show to show and getting caught in this perpetual loop of like, you know, going into the studio and then having to plan like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this song? Like, what's my strategy? Like, how am I going to release it? How is it going to be different from before? How am I going to stay relevant? How am I going to reinvent myself again? You know, should I release this as blah, blah, just like kind of going through like all of the business mode stuff. And, you know, I mean, with Lowen for the last 4 or 5 years, I, you know, booked and I really managed our schedules, our rehearsals and all that stuff. And I truthfully hadn't taken a break from managing a band since I was like 22 when I first moved here, which is 11 years ago. And I had just never given myself pause. Like I'd never let myself take a step back from that whole thing and felt what it really felt like to not have the pressure of like maintaining a band and booking and like kind of staying a part of the scene. And then once I kind of realized that I needed that break, I really leaned into it. And I didn't write for a lot of quarantine. I just within the last month started writing again. But yeah, it was a weird revelation. It and it's had its ups and downs, like, but yeah, I realized that I really needed to take a step back and kind of give myself some time to just, like, for one, not do anything, and then give myself the space to think about, okay, well, when we're on the other side of this, how do I want to carry about, like, my life? Because what I was doing before was obviously not sustainable. So, yeah.
That's interesting. It's good to hear, because if I'm being honest, like, I almost feel like a period like that is, I kind of know it is actually, for a number of personal and family reasons, that kind of I'm approaching a period like that. And I've been the same way. I've been in Austin for 10 years and just going nonstop, and
Yeah.
everything you just described, the business side of it, the creative side of it, the booking, all of it, all that stuff. It's like, I've been looking at that and like, I'm kind of ready to take just a little breather here and kind of reassess. So it's been good. It's been a good thing. And was it like 3 months, 4 months? And you said you started writing again, and you're just the ball rolling again?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, I think, like, it wasn't like I was just sitting on my couch. I definitely was staying busy, and, like, I really kind of started investing a lot of my energy into exercising and, like, just in general being a healthier person. And I think that after about 3 months of that, especially because, right now, like, it's not like we can't go to bars. Like, there's, like, so many kind of unhealthy aspects of the way that I was kind of living and operating prior to COVID-19, like, have all been kind of taken out. And I think that once I kind of really invested in my health, and then my brain space kind of started to open back up to creativity. I wasn't just, like, forcing myself to sit down and write a song just because I thought that was what I wanted to, because I had to do.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I feel rested. Like, I actually want to wake up and work on a song. I don't feel burnt out. I have creative ideas. I actually wrote a song, like, pretty recently, and, like, I got the idea when I was on a run, and just, like, kind of, I ran past some of the clubs and stuff, and was just, like, kind of thinking about the way that, the way that everything in this town used to be kind of pre COVID-19. I think, so yeah, I'd say it was probably about 3 to 4 months. And then the last month I've really started actually, like, sitting down and demoing stuff, and, or just writing something, or learning a new song. I mean, I end up thinking about music a lot just because I teach so much. So a lot of my musical energy kind of is, for lack of a better word, kind of taken from me because of teaching. But I've still felt more creative in the last month, and positive about the songs that I was writing than I have in a long time.
That's great to hear. Always good to hear that. So let's go back to the old days. Where are you from, Sarah? And can you tell us a little bit about kind of your early years of music? I have a feeling you started early. But I guess it's a good time to I met your parents, as strange as that is, in St. Petersburg.
Oh, yeah.
In St. Petersburg. Awesome. I think your hubby tipped them off that I was in town, and they actually came to the show, and I met them, and they're wonderful people, and you can
I forgot about that. That's
yeah,
awesome.
You can say hi to them for me. But yeah, tell us where you're from and kind of your early years of music.
Sure. Well, my parents are big fans of music, and they loved your show. They texted me afterwards and stuff.
Great.
And so I grew up, well, I don't know where to really start. But basically my parents were just big music fans. So, like, from a really early age, I was, like, going to concerts and my mom, she took like piano lessons when she was younger. She was the reason I got into songwriting. She wrote music for a lot of my life. She doesn't as much anymore, but she's still creative. I started doing like classical singing when I was like really young, like 5 or 6, and I really didn't do it for very long. And then my parents got me a keyboard when I was 7, but they were kind of hippie about it. We had a family bad experience. The only thing they forced me to do my entire life was ballet, and I hated it like more than anything in my life. I hated everything about it. I was a huge tomboy. I hated the color pink. I didn't want to wear a leotard. I couldn't touch my toes because I had like huge growth spurts, so I was like perpetually not flexible. And just in general hated anything that was like remotely feminine. And so their deal with me after that was like, okay, well, you have to do something with your body. So I started taking karate lessons, and then they were like, we're not going to force you to do anything ever again. You just have to if you want to do something, we have to talk about it. And so, they didn't force lessons on me or anything. They bought me a keyboard, that I really just kind of explored with. And they bought me some books, like Disney books and stuff. And I spent a lot of time with those books. And then when I was 11, I grew up in Florida, in Jacksonville. And when I was like about 11, we moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And it wasn't like the easiest transition, but it was, I'm an only child. So moving to a new town with like no siblings, the prospect of having to make friends and stuff wasn't particularly easy. And I was like a pretty shy, like independent kid. And we ended up going to this church, and I was just really fascinated with the woman that was playing piano. And I went up to her after the service was over and asked her for lessons, without talking to my parents about it. So we left church, and I was like, oh, hey, I signed up for piano lessons, by the way. And they were like, oh, okay. I guess let us know when you need us to drive you there. But yeah, that was kind of where my musical journey really started, or where I started to really find an identity with music. I took to piano like really fast. I'd kind of already sort of taught myself to read music with my Disney book. So I had a little bit of a leg up, and could play some by ear and stuff. But yeah, I just really fell in love with like classical piano, and that's kind of where that's where, like I stopped. Piano just started to become like a huge source of comfort in my life, where, I at that point didn't really know a whole lot of people in Charleston. And so I practiced a lot, basically. And it ended up getting me into a arts magnet middle school and high school for piano. So I was basically in a regular school, but I took piano classes every day from like 7th grade on through high school, which was awesome.
And what, aside from the classical training and classical practice and stuff, what were your kind of early, passions geared toward? What kind of music were you listening to and it was really affecting you?
It really differed. I mean, I would probably say I was like very kind of like tunnel vision for classical until I was probably about 13 or 14.
Wow.
When I was like ages 11 to 13 was like the early 2000s, which for top 40 radio was, NSYNC and Britney Spears and stuff. And I listened to all that stuff, but it wasn't like inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom started to kind of show me the basics of songwriting and, how to think about lyric writing. I started taking jazz piano lessons, and that kind of opened up a huge world for me in terms of like being able to know what kind of chords I could use to build a song. And then once my mom kind of saw that I was really taking to songwriting, she started just like shoving, Stevie Wonder. She bought me a Stevie Wonder record. She bought me a Talking Book. She bought me Tapestry, like I went through her old CDs and found Tori Amos's first CD. So like, once I figured out that like you could really use piano as like a writing tool, you know, and Elton John, obviously, then like that's outside of the classical world. That's where my musical life really exploded. It was like anybody, you know, Fiona Apple, Tidal, like discovering that record.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, but any piano singer songwriter basically. And I also listen to a lot of rock and roll. My, you know, like Rolling Stones is always around in our house. I'm named after a Fleetwood Mac song.
Which one?
There's one called Sarah.
Okay.
It's on Tusk.
Okay, I don't know that one actually.
It's a little bit more obscure, but it's a good tune. It's a Stevie Nicks one. Yeah, but yeah. So I was always like.
So it was almost a full life, you know, gradual thing, and just kind of brought in new stuff as you went. And then I think I saw. Did you go to Berkeley? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
College. And how was that experience?
That was cool. I mean, you know, I think honestly, I'd say so. Like I said, I was taking music classes like pretty heavily in middle school and high school, and I was like doing classical piano competitions and stuff. I felt like pretty confident about my skill level on piano, but at the time I was like super nerdy about English literature. I had some really great English teachers in high school. And they got me just really kind of like excited about different books and poetry. And I loved analyzing stuff, like analyzing stories and different prose or whatever. And so I was pretty convinced I was going to go to college for English lit. That's like what I wanted to do for the longest time. And then my junior year came around and I had to start thinking about colleges. And I think I realized that piano was like really the one thing in my whole life that I consistently was like curious about and inspired by. And I didn't really think that I wanted to go to college for classical piano. I was like a little bit burnt out at that point. But I had gotten really into jazz and writing. And so I started checking out which universities had composition programs and more kind of a contemporary music approach. I like never wanted to go like the Juilliard route. Mm-hmm. And so then I started kind of finding the more non-traditional conservatories, and those were at the time Berkeley, Belmont University in Nashville, University of Miami, and there was one other one I looked at. I can't remember. I auditioned at all three of those, though, and had really terrible experience in Miami, and then I just didn't really vibe with Nashville when I was there auditioning. And Berkeley was my top pick from the get-go, and they ended up being the school that gave me the scholarship, so it was just kind of serendipitous. But I moved up there with two guys that I went to high school with that were both trumpet players, which don't ever live with two trumpet players in your life, ever.
Just because of the practicing?
Yeah.
The personalities?
Definitely practicing. They're great people. But yeah, I like made them practice with their trumpet out the window, but it didn't really make a difference. And with the mute and all that kind of stuff. But Berkeley was cool. I mean, it was just like, it was like I think that I was probably more conditioned to the environment there just because of my middle school and high school, because I was used to being kind of doing music in an academic setting. Mm-hmm. The people that just didn't like it were the people that like they had never really been in a formal setting with music before, I don't think. So yeah, it was great. I learned a lot. If I could go back, I would probably do a couple different things differently. Just because, I mean, when you're 18, like you really don't know what you're doing. No. I mean, I'm 33 and I don't know what I'm doing. So, but, I think, hindsight's always 20/20, but I did have a great time there. And I still have I'm still really close with like my group of best friends that I met there. One of my first friends I made at college, his name's James Booker, and he plays in Whiskey Shivers. But he lives here, works just down the street from me, like we're super tight.
Awesome.
And so yeah, I am still very grateful for my experience there.
My most recent bass player and drummer both went to Berkeley. They're young. They're younger. But I visited the campus when we were on tour. I went up to some of the buildings as one of the guys was revisiting his years, and looked like a fun place to go. I was definitely a late bloomer, so I was never. My talent level at 18 through 22 would have never ever measured up with because it was never in my possible realm of going there. But it was a cool place to visit. So you went to Berkeley, and then what did you do after that? Did you come to Austin right away?
Pretty much, yeah. I had some cousins that lived here, and I'd say probably around Christmas of my senior year in college, I was realizing that I needed to kind of figure out where I was going to go. Berkeley,
are they musicians too?
My cousins?
Yeah.
No.
They just lived here.
No, they just live here. They work for UT. All three of them actually. Berkeley, their kind of whole MO is that like most people that graduate Berkeley end up in New York, LA, or Nashville, because those are like the big music towns. And I, at that point, knew that I didn't want to be in New York. It was too expensive. I was so over the winter. I'm like a little Southeast surfer girl. I was like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah. I get that.
I didn't want to go to LA. I'd never been there, and it was, I grew up on the East Coast, so I was just like, it's literally the other side of the country. It felt too weird. And so I came here for spring break for South by my senior year with the guy that I was dating at the time, and who also lives here now. And after that kind of week of being here, I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna move to Austin. And he was like, okay, I'm gonna move too. Like, let's do it. And so we pretty much packed up our respective apartments in Boston. He drove the U-Haul truck here with his mother, and I drove here with my mom, and that was pretty much it. But I graduated the spring of 2009, and I was living here by September of 2009. So
it's crazy how many people, I guess that's the musician, it has to do with, that's the musician mindset also, is you're kind of looking for a new pasture, and then once you find it, you go. But it's crazy how many people in Austin have that same story for the most part. I mean, I moved here without ever having been here and not knowing anybody, but it just made sense. My wife moved here after visiting for, it may have been South by or something else, and then just said, yeah, I'm going to move here. And it seems like almost everybody I know, it's a very similar tune, unless they're from Texas and it's just an easy place to come away from Houston or Dallas or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think after 4 years in Boston, I was like really hungry for Southern hospitality and like people being nice to each other. I mean, there are plenty of nice people in Boston, but the Northeast has like a certain hardness that like,
of course, yeah,
that I could roll with. But after coming down here, kind of like being back in some semblance of the South, like I was just like, oh, people say hello to each other on the street here. That's nice, and I think having a little bit of family here was comforting as well. I knew that I didn't want to move home. I didn't at that point. My parents were still in Charleston, South Carolina, and I just had no interest in going back to Charleston. It's a beautiful city, but it was just like there wasn't really anything for me there. So, and I didn't want to move back to Florida because that still kind of felt like it just didn't interest me. So yeah.
Yeah, Austin is exceptionally welcoming. I mean, I know the South is definitely got that Southern hospitality thing, but there's definitely something very special about Austin, and
Yeah.
the immediacy of the kindness that you encounter.
Oh, totally.
And it's I experienced it. Everyone I know who moved out from elsewhere experienced it as well. So it's a special thing that we get to enjoy. And I've kind of, I was saying this to somebody, I've kind of become accustomed to it. It's like I don't even think about it that much anymore. But I remember it was striking when I first moved here how nice everybody was.
Where did you move here from?
I moved from Chicago, so I'm
Oh, nice.
definitely from that northern winter vibe. And so I once I moved here, I'm never going back to that.
Yeah.
Unless some life curveball comes where I have no choice.
Yeah.
I don't need winter in my life anymore. Real winter.
Yeah.
And the
Well,
Midwest.
the planet's heating up, so maybe we'll all end up there eventually.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it is like, so I'm from Wisconsin originally. I grew up in Milwaukee, and then I moved to Chicago later on. But that area is kind of one of the safest areas in terms of weather.
Mm-hmm.
You have the cold, and you get some blizzards, and you get once in a while some tornadoes. More tornadoes if you're kind of in the plains and stuff like that. But you don't get earthquakes, you don't get floods, it's pretty safe little pocket there. So maybe people will start to retreat there when all hell breaks loose. I thought of another question actually that I had from something earlier you said, because it's relevant to my interests. You say you were really into literature and stuff when you were in high school. I hit my English literature interest kind of later when I was in college, but I always enjoy asking people who were your like favorite people to read when you were in that stage.
Ooh, see, when I was in that stage, so I would say that, well, I'd say like earlier in high school, like 9th and 10th grade, I got really into mythology, like Greek mythology.
That's always good.
About, like my English teacher freshman year had us read Dante's Inferno too. So like reading kind of the classic texts and like researching, context, like all the references that they make. I think I always have been fascinated by mythology. I still am. So that was kind of initially my interest. Then I'd say 10th, 11th grade, I got really into your dystopian, that my angst started to come out.
Sure.
And like, I started to read, Ray Bradbury, and not Clockwork Orange. Like reading that book was like, because of what he did with language.
I read the book before I saw the movie. And it was one of the first, because I told you, I got into reading, English, that kind of stuff a little later. I was a little bit more into other stuff when I was younger, and that was one of the first ones I like read on my own as a late teenager or whatever it was, and I love that book too. That was a good one.
Yeah. I remember like my teacher, when I told her I was going to read it for the project or whatever, she was like, just read the first 15 pages without trying to understand what he's saying. And then your brain will like do the rest. And I just remember like, sure enough, getting to like the 16th, 17th page and then being like, oh, I know what he's talking about now. It's just I
remember that about that book for sure.
Cool vibe. But then my teacher, I took AP literature. I guess it was my senior year, or maybe it was my junior year. I can't remember. But he was kind of who really got me into poetry. He was a songwriter. We did like lots of analysis about Bob Dylan, like Bob Dylan lyrics and stuff. He also really got me into like Anne Sexton, and her poetry. It was kind of like the perfect moment too, because I feel like that's when I started to really kind of like identify with feminism and like, being a strong woman and realizing the injustices of the world and all that kind of stuff. And Anne Sexton was like really one of the first women to write about getting her period and like wanting to have sex with people, and like, just like her and Sylvia Plath were kind of hand in hand. I think Anne Sexton was like a little bit, they were both very depressed, but like she was really prolific and not as known, I don't think, but yeah, I really kind of like got into her stuff and got into guys like Robinson Jeffers. I loved the way that he wrote about nature. Also getting into more kind of like, I guess that was like when I got into like Steinbeck and like, what's the guy's name? He wrote Cool Hand Luke.
I don't even know
On Pierce. Which that book also, I had seen the movie before I read that book, but that book is amazing also. But yeah, I think like, and nowadays I'm actually like a very slow reader. Taylor blows through books like once a week and it takes me forever to finish them. Nowadays I'm mostly read a lot of sci-fi. So
yeah, I'm a slow reader too. And my wife loves sci-fi as well.
Yep.
And I'm a big Steinbeck fan. He was always one of my favorites as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to Austin, and then kind of where do you start your path at Austin? Now, you said you moved with a boyfriend at the time. Were you guys at a project together? Did you start working for your own project? Did you start being a hired hand? How did the early years in Austin go for you?
Well, I started a band with him and another girl that I went to college with who doesn't live here anymore. And I got a job at Guero's Taco Bar on South Congress. It was my first job in Austin, and I worked there for like 7 years. It was a great job. I made really good money, and I met some of my best friends in Austin working there. There were, like most restaurants in Austin, there were a ton of music people that worked there, and artists. That's kind of the one great thing about the service industry, is that it really caters to people that just need a regular source of income, so that they can maintain their creative life. And so I met a lot of people through that restaurant and kind of learned from them, like how to, who to email about booking, and all that kind of stuff. So I had a project and I started a weekly residency it was Beauty Bar, which this guy, James Taylor, who now lives in Minnesota and works at First Avenue. He managed Beauty Bar, and then it turned into Holy Mountain eventually, before becoming, I think it's closed now, but it's been through a couple different phases. But I had a residency there. And
what were you doing? What kinds of stuff were you doing in that residency?
We called it Sunday's Best, and it was basically just everybody, like I would just book 3 or 4 bands. My band would always play. It was called A House of Home. It was like a pop project. And sometimes we'd have like vendors and stuff. I'd always try to get like beer sponsors of some kind, but I learned a lot through working with James, and that kind of gave me an avenue to book other bands and meet other bands, because I had this regular spot where it was like, hey, my band we have a thing on Sundays at Holy Mountain or at Beauty Bar every week. Like it was easy to kind of get the ball rolling with that. And then that band just started to kind of like, it just, like it just fizzled a little bit, and I just didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing as a songwriter in a band. And I think subsequently also my relationship was like, maybe I knew that it was like kind of starting to not be the best thing for me, even though he's a great person. So yeah, I started to want to kind of separate myself from that band. And right when that happened was about when one of the last shows we played with The Couch, which was Taylor's band at the time. And that's how I met him. And through that band, I met a lot of people. I eventually was a member of that band. Taylor interviewed me for a paper on the experience of the female musician in Austin. And in that interview, I was like, yeah, I kind of pulled the plug on my band. I don't really want to be the front person anymore. And he was like, oh, crazy, because I was looking for somebody to play rhythm guitar and keys and sing in my band. And so I was like, okay. And we played together in that band for like 2 to 3 years. And they had quite a bit of momentum going when I joined. So I met and made a lot of connections through that band, for sure.
Very cool. And then was it shortly thereafter that Lowen came about, or was there another project in between that?
Nope, that was well, as the story goes, Taylor and I ended up dating. And after a while, I think he realized it a little bit before I did, but it was like we wanted our own projects basically. We both write a lot. It worked really well for a while. But I think, like for me also having my own identity as a musician was always really important to me. And I wanted that kind of like feeling of autonomy back, in terms of like being able to write for my own band and feel like I had creative control, and stuff. And he wanted the same thing. So we split off, and he kind of morphed the couch, as it was, into Otis the Destroyer. And I started Lowen like pretty shortly after that. So yeah.
And tell us a little bit about.
Sorry, I'm on the phone. Yeah, thanks for checking on me though. Sorry.
No worries. So Lowen's been going strong for about 5 years now, 6 years, something like that.
Yeah. Probably. I guess like I would have to look at what the date of our first show is. Yeah, I'd say like 5 or 6 though.
And are you able to? Is that pretty much your baby in kind of its entirety in terms of the creative process? I'm sure there's parts here and there that are contributed to by your co-bandmates, but
oh yeah,
is it mostly your vision kind of thing?
Yeah, for the most part, I would say like we were, and this is also kind of, so I'd say up until the last year, we were very, writing in rehearsal rooms. The guitar player, Michael, who is like one of my best friends, we were doing a lot of demoing together at his house. On our last record, even like one of the songs was a song that he wrote that I just put lyrics and a melody to, and stuff. But we were writing a lot together. And that, like, I think we had gotten to a place where we had like really figured out how to write together. And all the guys in the band have always been really great with kind of riding the wave of my stylistic choices. I just don't like to sound the same. I kind of changed the way that I wanted Lowen to sound at least like 3 or 4 times now. And they've always been really great with that. And then back in January earlier, well, kind of like the end of last year into January, I started to just really want to write more on my own, and trust myself in the studio. It wasn't for like at the fault of anybody. I think that I just realized that like I'd never really trusted my ideas in the studio, and I wanted to trust myself, and I also knew that I knew what I wanted out of this like kind of collection of songs that I was starting to form. So yeah, I'd say like over the song that we released in January was probably the most direct result of that, where it was really just me in the studio with my friend Adam, who is the engineer and like co-producer and stuff. But we've kind of gone through different forms of writing.
Yeah, I was revisiting some of your stuff a couple days ago, and it's a wide range of stuff. It's good you can get all that stuff out of you when you have your own project, and it's because I know you've been in other projects, and before I was doing solo stuff, I was in a band where there was a lot of collaboration, and I loved it. And then it gets to a point where there's only so much time, and all of us, and you described this earlier, all of us have this stuff we got to get in, and then it gets to a point where you're actually limiting your potential. You're limiting your own potential by sharing your time. So, and that's a tricky thing. So I think some people it's the perfect amount of collaboration and expression. And some people, this, like me and you, it sounds like this is not enough. I need more. I need more
Yeah.
ability to express myself. So.
Well, and I, prior to, excuse me, prior to, like, when I was in college, my goal was to never be, I didn't want to be a performing singer-songwriter. I wanted to write for other people. Like, I wanted to sell my songs to a publisher and have, Ariana Grande sing them or something like that. Like, I, not because of the paycheck, but just because, like, being a front person has never been natural for me. And which is another reason why I don't really mind the break from shows right now. But I think that, like, nowadays I'm perfectly happy writing for myself, but I think that when I look at my catalog and, like, look at all the different ways that I write and stuff, I think that's where that drive to kind of write for other people came from, is that, like, I like my dream career is like Beck, like, where he reinvents himself every record, I think that is, like, that's awesome. 'Cause, like, there's just so much stuff you can do with music. I mean, I love electronica music and electronica production. But I wrote a song on acoustic guitar in Open D last week that, like, I also really love. So I think, the one thing that I find a little bit frustrating as, like, kind of self-identifying as an artist is like, I just have never wanted to, like, to be in a box, So yeah, with Lowen, it's definitely my project, but I've started to feel over the last year that I was, like, a little bit confined to what I should sound like, or what needed to be, what it was supposed to sound like, and all that stuff.
So now that you've had your little kind of hiatus and things slowly but surely seem to be heading in the right direction, at least kind of right now, there's a little bit more shows opening up.
Right.
Are you going to kind of get the chips back together with Lowen and get that project? Where do you see your creative juices flowing in the 6 to 12 months to come?
I think that right now, I don't honestly, I miss my bandmates. I see Michael's my neighbors, so I see him pretty often. I haven't seen the other guys really at all since quarantine began, but we talk and stuff. But I don't really have a desire to get in a rehearsal room yet. I'm trying to just really trust how I feel about everything and put energy into stuff that is fulfilling to me, which right now is mostly writing and demoing on my own. I really miss studio work. I do, in addition to teaching, I've been fortunate enough to get asked to do a lot of session work, kind of around town. And I really love being in the studio. I think, like, if I could play a show once a year, but just, like, be in the studio all the time, I would do that for sure. This being in the studio and creating has always been way more of an outlet for me than actually performing. So I don't plan on, this year I had plans to release another Lowen EP. I've still got about 3 or 4 other songs mostly done, that I had planned on putting out this year that I'm probably not going to put out till next year. And then I've got this whole batch of songs that I'm kind of writing and demoing on my own, that I think that I'd like to release under my own name. I've been writing music since I was 14, and I've never put something out just as SARA HOUSER. So exploring ideas like that. But I think I'm planning on taking the rest of the year of 2020 at least to kind of just, like, rest and do what I can for social justice, make sure that is at the forefront of my attention, and create without kind of the parameters of, like, oh, what am I going to do with this song? Just kind of, like, write and see where it goes. And then hopefully by the beginning of next year, the world will be in a better place and we'll have new leadership, and it'll feel like the right time to put some new art out into the world. So.
Yeah. So the teaching interests me because I've worked with kids for years as well, and I just want to hear a little bit about what you get out of that. I know what you said; it sucks up a lot of your musical energy, as it would, but obviously you have enough left in the tank because you're quite active outside of it. But just tell us a little bit about kind of what you get out of working with kids. I've done it for years as well, more so in the sports realm, but I did dabble with music stuff, and I really enjoyed it. I just had to pursue more financially viable day job work that I couldn't do as much, but I enjoyed it. I imagine you get a lot out of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I come from like a big family of teachers. And I never thought that I would be a teacher. I was like, I just didn't think that I had it in me. I didn't think I was a very patient person. And then it really, my kind of journey with teaching, it started about 4 or 5 years ago. I was working at Guerrero's, and I was starting to get real burnt on the service industry. Just in general, I wanted to do something different. And one of my coworkers, she was really close with this guy named Rick Carney, who is the music commissioner now, I think, of Austin. But he was running a School of Rock, which is up on Anderson and Burnett. And they had an opening for a piano teacher. And I applied, and that was kind of where I really started to learn how to teach. School of Rock has a pretty cool kind of like core curriculum in place, which was really great for me because I really hadn't had a whole lot of experience teaching. And I mean, it's like super fun to like teach the White Stripes and like, you know, Zeppelin and whatever. So yeah, I kind of like, I eased into it, and then I just like really started to love interacting with kids with music. Like seeing kids excited about music is awesome. And seeing it become an outlet for kids that are struggling is awesome. You know, like I've been fortunate to work with kids on the spectrum, which is amazing and like super inspiring. And, you know, like 7-year-olds are hilarious. So I just really kind of like fell in love with teaching, and have been thankful that I've been able to do it still. But yeah, it definitely, it zaps me in a different way. But it's also, you know, I was really thankful for it in quarantine, especially because, you know, like without teaching, I think, you know, most of us lost a lot of our identity as musicians. Like you're not able to perform, you're not able to like be in the studio, you're not able to tour. You know, those are big things. And so I think with teaching, I was really grateful that I could still hold on to like my musicianship and know that like it was still there and still very much part of my life, as it always will be. But yeah, it's yeah, teaching's cool, but I wish that it was more financially viable for sure.
Yeah, I did with a competitor of band. It's pretty much the same thing, but a different company in Austin. I did a band camp, so it was like 4 hours. I think it was 4 hours a day for like 2 weeks, and these kids were all kind of tweeners, you know. And it was like you just have five kids playing different instruments, and you just ask what music they want to play and guide them through it. And it was absolutely fantastic. I was pretty lucky. I had a good group, and we were able to knock out. I mean, they would just pick up a Zeppelin song, pick up whatever, and everyone got to choose, and it was great. But I had another kind of day job thing going where I was like, well, and it was also the timing, like for those kids, it's after school hours.
Yeah.
And if I had stacked my schedule there, it meant I would not get to see my daughter at all because she'd be in daycare, and then I'd be, so that was like, it's just not going to work. But I wish it would have, because it was super fun. And then I wanted to ask you a little bit about another exciting project that you're in, which is Golden Dawn Orchestra, because that's such a cool, funky thing. And you've played with them kind of, I know they have kind of a revolving door of members to an extent, but you've played with them for a couple years, and didn't you do you do maybe like a European tour with them or something?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So how was that?
They're awesome. They're
Yeah.
very all beautiful people. And they, what happened with that was we shared a booking agent, 9 Mile Booking, touring and records. And, the girl that had been playing, the woman that had been playing vibraphone for them, got a gig with a really big like stadium touring band. And
A vibraphone? Is that all she plays?
so no, she got the job as a keyboard player.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, but she played vibraphone with Golden Dawn, and our booking agent called me, and he was like, "Do you know how to play vibraphone?" And I was like, I mean, I played in jazz band a little bit. I can play piano, so theoretically, you're playing piano with sticks, basically." Right. Not to marginalize the work of vibraphonists, because it is really freaking hard. Yeah. But I was like, I'll give it a go. And so I auditioned for him on keyboard, and then I auditioned for him on vibraphone. And yeah, it just worked out. And then I recorded on their last record. And we did a cover for KUT that we recorded together. But it's awesome. It's like, the thing that I love about working with them is that it's so different from like my world of songwriting. It's much more like cinematic. It's also incorporates a lot of world music elements that like I don't use in low end, but I know a lot about from my education at Berkeley. And it's like they're all jazz people too. So it's just like it's being able to use a different part of my kind of musical upbringing live. And they're just like a fun group of people as well.
And how was the Europe experience? Where did you guys go in Europe?
It was 5 weeks. We went to
cool.
Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, France, Luxembourg. I think that's it.
That's a big project to bring overseas. Was it kind of a scene, or
11.
was it all? Jeez.
11 people. Yeah.
What were you guys traveling in? A van or a couple vans?
It was actually really nice. It was an extended Sprinter, and then they had a car. So there were like 8 of us usually eight of us in the Sprinter van, and then 3 or 4 in the car. And we'd kind of like move around and stuff. But yeah, it was like, it was really, that was their 3rd European tour. And they have a big following over there. We were playing really big festivals. I think like the first gig we had, we were playing for like, it was like one of the biggest shows I'd ever played or something. Wow. I was just like, but yeah, they've just like put in a lot of work overseas, and it's paid off. So our accommodations were like really nice. It's, it was like, honestly, I got a little spoiled from it. So.
Cool. So you mentioned, I'll let you go out of here in a bit. I appreciate you being here. You mentioned that you're kind of focused on social justice, and I'm just curious what kind of elements of that have you been? Obviously, it's a pretty heated topic right now.
Well, I think that it's really important. I mean, it's, I think that it's especially important as a white person to be doing the most listening you've ever done in your life right now. Mm-hmm. Social justice has always been something that's been important to me. It's something that was kind of, racial inequality was something that my mom actually talked a lot about when I was younger. Just like being present and aware of what's going on in this country, I think is really important because, the circumstances that we're seeing kind of like unfold here are the result of hundreds of years of systemic racism, and there's a reckoning happening that I think is long overdue. So I would say that, like I've definitely been donating when I can financially, but I think mostly I'm trying my best to just really listen to people of color and about their experiences and be present where I can and supportive and, safely attend protests, read as much as possible, and educate myself in the best way to help us move forward as a country, so that you know, I mean, I think that the reckoning with police brutality is something that is long overdue, and I'm excited to see that the conversations, the hard conversations about funding and stuff are happening through the country. I'm holding my breath about the election, and I'm trying to stay positive, although it is really hard. But I think that I think social justice is something that everybody should be putting energy into right now. So.
Very cool. And just as a closing question here, you talk about moving forward. I'm interested on your thoughts in terms of the music industry and moving forward, and Austin as a music city moving forward. And any thoughts, feelings you've had over this 6 months about what we have in store for us, or what we can do with what we're given, and anything in that realm I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on.
You know, I think that Austin's going to go through a mourning period. I think we're going to lose a lot of venues, and it's going to be really tough, especially the ones that have been, you know, there's a lot of sentimental value or sentimental attachment to the venues in town. I know that there are for me personally, and losing venues is going to be really hard. What I hope that happens after the grieving period is that Austin is afforded a chance to look at the music business model and see what they can do better next time. You know, I think there has always been a lack of industry in Austin, and it's kept a lot of bands from really kind of taking their next step into being more of a national act. I think that it was really easy to kind of get caught in the playing week to week, you know, forever party mode kind of aspect of the music scene in Austin. I think the music scene in Austin was really whitewashed as well. So I hope that we come out of this just better. It's gonna suck, and you know, but it's like I don't want us to be those people in 20 years that are like, oh, the old Austin was better. It's like, this is a real chance for us to kind of like get a do-over and prioritize things that didn't get a lot of attention before, and reevaluate your business model as a band and as like a city that operates. That's the live music capital of the world. You know, I mean, the average income for Austin musicians hasn't increased in like 2 decades or something like that. It's ridiculous. And so yeah. So I would say that regarding that, I know that it's going to be hard, and I think a lot of people are going to leave to go to other cities. But I hope that Austin, the musicians that do stay committed to seeing through it, that we all use it as an opportunity to grow and make something better.
Very cool. Very cool. Very keen thoughts there. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. And
yeah, thanks for
I
having me.
really appreciate it. I look forward to hearing some work when we all get through this and get to some shows. Who knows when that's going to be, but
yeah.
I wish you guys the best, you and your wonderful husband, and you can say hi to your parents for me too.
Awesome. I will.
I've met them. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for talking to me, Sam.
Of course, Sarah. Thank you.